NightMerica is an independently produced podcast. If you like what we're doing, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/NightMerica. And please tell your friends about us.
Welcome to NightMerica, a podcast that takes you on a tour of the abnormal, paranormal, weirdly true, and truly weird in every corner across this nation. Because, to paraphrase Ray Parker Jr., whether it's ghosts, aliens, monsters, or monstrous humans, there's something strange in your neighborhoods. Episode 17, 4th of July, and National Nightmares. So today we're going to be talking a little bit, well, as we record this, we're leading up to 4th of July weekend. Lots of fireworks all over the place, barbecues. That was a good firework sound, not static. Sounded a little bit like static or radio interference, but that was Britt's firework sound.
It's ASMR.
Right. And I'm your co-host, Aaron Sagers, and joined, as always, by Britt.
Britt, ASMR host. That's also probably the quietest I'll ever be on this podcast ever.
The firework sounds?
No, the whispering of me saying it's ASMR.
People are going to think it's paranormal in nature. Which would be crazy.
Britt's
I wonder
so quiet.
if I never really thought about that. I wonder with all the podcasts that are being recorded, if there are any EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, that have been picked up in the course of recording a podcast.
Oh my God, we should do a podcast on that.
Well, we would have to know what the evidence would be if that's occurred before.
True.
And the thing with a lot of audio equipment is, well, first off, a producer for podcasts that have a true producer and staff, they would be listening for things and probably eliminating any kind of anomalies, not because they're trying to eliminate evidence, but they're just not even thinking about it. They're like, oh, there's some random sound. So it's kind of an interesting thought. But that aside, so 4th of July, since you grew up in France, does this holiday not really have much of a, I mean, you are American, and the French Revolution definitely
Bastille Day's coming up.
Yes, modeled. Yes, so like the French democratic system was heavily inspired by the American democratic system. But do you have a lot of thoughts or fond recollections of 4th of July?
So actually I do, because 4th of July is the anniversary of my parents' very first ever date. My mom was like real gorgeous in high school. I mean, she's real gorgeous now, but she was like so beautiful in high school. And my dad was this sweet little nerd that wore these giant glasses, and he was the cashier at their local grocery store. And my mom had a date on the 4th of July with someone else, but she kind of had a crush on my dad because my dad was like a really beloved guy in the community. And my dad finally got the guts to ask her out. And so my mom stood up someone else to go out with my dad. It'll be their 42nd anniversary this coming 4th of July. So happy anniversary, guys. They're real cute.
So I like that celebrating the birth of America, birth of our nation, 244 years of celebrating our founding fathers, declaring independence, but Britt has to make it about her and her lineage. And
yeah, but it's such a cute story. They went to Dairy Queen and they got a Cherry Mr. Misty, and they still do that.
I find it incredibly cute that the founding fathers were declared independence from King George III in 1776. And that 4th of July is commemorating essentially, ultimately, the birth of our nation. I think that that's pretty cute.
Well,
But,
also the 4th of July, the Declaration of Independence wasn't even signed in July. So it's like not even like a necessarily specific date.
well, okay, but okay, so that's why it's more of a personal holiday. That's why everybody gets a day off, in fact. It's to celebrate
White men.
Brit's family. Um, for me, I mean, I'm such a child of summer. I love summer. I love the sunshine. I love heat, hot weather. So, and I like a good barbecue.
Mm-hmm.
Fireworks I enjoy. I'm not so enamored with fireworks as other. I mean, I like things blowing up. I love blowing things up, but I mean, I, I some habits, old habits die hard. I would blow things up as a child, so I still enjoy it. But I'm not so much into fireworks displays, but I do enjoy them. They're fun.
How do your
Been a
dogs with
lot
the
of.
fireworks?
My dogs are pretty chill about it. And I'll tell you, so we, of course, are during this time, during sort of as we record this, during pandemic time, and a time of a lot of social unrest and protests against, systemic racism, there have been a lot of all night fireworks displays, especially in
Mm-hmm.
Brooklyn, where I live. And it is getting a little tiring. I mean, I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of reasons behind the constant fireworks and I think that there's some young people that are setting them off. I think it's both rebellion and sort of part of a protest. I don't really advocate calling the cops on someone for setting off fireworks, but it has been pretty nonstop in New York recently.
Yeah.
But the dogs are okay with it, more or less. They've been a little twitchy as it just continues going on and on and on. Kind of makes me wonder if there'll be less enthusiasm for actual fireworks displays this year in many cities
Yeah,
because
it
of
could
the
be.
constant fireworks. But so yeah, that's kind of the basis of what we're leading into this week.
Mm-hmm.
And spoiler, neither of the stories we're going to be telling has anything to do with Brit's parents going on their first date. So I just want the audience to know right now, if you're expecting a setup, a story, a good paranormal story about their first date,
No, there's nothing.
womp womp. Yeah, sorry
They were two
guys.
high schoolers.
Yeah,
It's dull. They're still married. They're still cute. Like it's not
happiness
paranormal.
is dull. People,
Happiness is dull.
yes, people, people being in love years after, decades after going on the first date.
Yep.
That's not good. Not good drama. Instead, we do have good drama. We have some true crime and paranormal stories coming right up. But first, how about some news? What news story of the weird are you bringing today
this
to
this
NightMerica?
Tonight, America. So I read a really good article in the New York Times called "Many Many Nights at the Museum" by Stefanos Chen. For those who are lucky enough to be working during the pandemic, I am not one of them, but for those who are lucky enough, they are able to work from home. But the New York Times wrote this article on people who always work from home, and that's people that are hired by the New York Department of Parks and Rec who live full time at the historic mansions across the city. I think this is so cool, Aaron. I think you should do this. It's people who live in the house full time. They take care of it. They give tours. They do posts about it. But now during Corona, they're just hanging out because there's no one coming in to do tours. So the catch is it's super hard to get a job with them. I checked, and it's also tough because they don't have a lot of current technology. The cell reception is spotty, and a lot of them don't have TVs. But they have ghosts. There's a
Oh, of
guy,
course, yeah.
so cool. There's a guy, Antonio Cruz. He takes care of one of the Bronx mansions. It didn't say exactly which one in the story. I wonder if they're trying to keep his privacy a little bit. But in a quote from the article, he says, in 2005, Mr. Cruz heard a frightening scream around 2 a.m. from the end of a long driveway. The next morning, it was clear that someone tried to jimmy the window of their car, but left in a hurry. They believe a spirit, perhaps a past resident, was watching out for the caretaker and his family. So they're preventing robberies, those ghosts. They're good ghosts.
Yeah, well, there's endless stories about protective spirits that warn people of impending danger. There's some really creepy ones out there. I'm not going to recap them now. Or recap them now. But there are some great stories of protective ghosts out there. I find it fascinating. It makes me wonder. There's the Morris Jumel Mansion in Manhattan. It's something like over 200 years. 200. I think it might be older than the nation itself, oh. and it's like at the tippy tip of Manhattan. And I know that's notoriously haunted, so it's close to the Bronx. I wonder if that's maybe what they're talking about.
Maybe.
Cool. But that's cool. Was there more from that story you wanted to share?
No. I mean, it's a great article. You can find it on the New York Times, but that was like the main ghost segment.
Yeah. No, I like that a lot. Yeah. I always wanted to be a park ranger when I was a kid. You would be a
great park ranger. That's why when I read this article, I thought of you. You're good at this kind of stuff.
Well, I would happily live in a mansion. Thank you. I'm glad when you think who would be great at living in a haunted mansion, you do think of me. I would love to do that, especially if it was the haunted mansion from Disney. But when I was a kid, I thought that when you were a park ranger, I had this idea that, yes, it was a great job, but I was always very concerned about like how you peed, because I thought that when you're a park ranger that you had to live the whole time in the little sort of lookout thing on the top of like the stilts or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, that could be really inconvenient. You got to go up and down all the time. If you got to go to the bathroom, do they have bathrooms up there? So it was really my own toiletry concerns that I think perhaps kept me from pursuing that life. So.
Oh, that's great.
Haunted mansion caretaker, though, it's right up my alley. Although then you have to worry about ghosts watching you poop and pee.
Yep, and people throwing their ashes at you if you're at the haunted mansion.
Yeah, definitely that too. Well, that does happen. We've talked about that before, but that doesn't really happen because there's not typically actors inside the haunted mansion, True. So it's not being thrown at people. It's like they're dumping it out on the side of the ride, which then cameras captured.
And then people vacuum up.
Get vacuumed up and just discarded unceremoniously. I like that story a lot. Mine is more, it's definitely newsy. I mean, it's national news. So, you've certainly heard of a lot of this footage being released by the Air Force and the government about UFOs or unidentified aerial phenomena is what they're calling it now instead of UFOs. I still like UFOs more.
I prefer UFOs.
Yeah, it's just catchier. You're not going to stop trying to make UAPs happen, government. Yeah. Anyhow, so there's been a lot of those leaking out, and I don't know if you're familiar with the idea, the concept of disclosure. Mm-mm. It means that we are moving, or hopefully moving, towards this moment of acknowledgement of really what's going on. That basically the government or governments around the world know what's going on, and that we're getting closer to them saying, okay, here's the deal, here's the skinny. Well, the Senate Intelligence Committee, and this is coming from Politico, just from a couple of days ago, Senate Intelligence Committee has voted to require U.S. intelligence agencies and the Defense Department to compile a detailed public analysis of all data collected on unidentified aerial phenomena, including intrusions recorded by Navy pilots in recent years. So what this really means is that some of these senators want the public to see the government's UFO reports.
Yep, show us the receipts.
Show us the receipts. And where are the UFOs, yo? And literally show us the receipts, because if we're making them, how much is it costing us to make these crafts?
Yeah.
You know, that's certainly, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Independence Day with Will Smith, but
of course not.
It's a great movie. And Independence Day, hey, timely reference. So the actor Judd Hirsch plays Jeff Goldblum's father, and at one point someone's like, wait, aliens are real? You have a secret base? What's going on? And he's like, of course. Like, look at how much the government is saying it spends on things. Do you really think a hammer costs $500? No. Where do you think all that money is going? So, yeah, I tend to think that there's certainly money being funneled elsewhere. Anyhow, this committee is saying that it, quote, remains concerned that there is no unified, comprehensive process within the federal government for collecting and analyzing intelligence on UAP, despite the potential threat, which is kind of interesting. They go straight to potential threat. And so some senators had already previously been briefed on some of these things, but they basically want more information to come out for the public to get access to it. The panel is chaired by Marco Rubio, the Republican senator from Florida. Not a fan of him, I'm willing to say.
Yep.
I think that this is an interesting thing for them to be pursuing. Maybe it's not top level. There's a lot of other things that perhaps we should be pursuing right now instead of this, but I do find this somewhat interesting. Although I think that this kind of committee does somewhat legitimize the topic. I don't think that it's so crazy anymore to talk about UFOs and wanting more government transparency.
For sure.
I also don't think it's going to happen. I am somewhat skeptical that we're going to have a disclosure moment. I tend to think that what we're getting is maybe as much as we're going to be getting, and then things will sort of be dialed down again, sort of to calm people's interest down again. Like, okay, they got that, so then we're going to turn down the notch a little bit. And I think that, honestly, there are probably agencies and money moving behind the scene that we know nothing about. And if there are people within the government that don't want us to know about it, Marco Rubio and his intelligence committee is not going to compel them to share that information.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think it'll probably remain somewhat obscured as long as certain intelligence agencies want to keep it obscured. So,
yeah.
Do you think people are ready for that kind of information?
I don't know. I feel like there is probably a small percentage of the population that is. I feel like probably a large part of our listeners and most people that listen to paranormal stuff are. But I know a lot of people that just flat out don't believe in aliens. And I think they would be completely flabbergasted at hearing that news.
Well, it doesn't have to be aliens either. There's a lot of different potential things. So are they things in the sky? Are they government in nature? Man-made? Are they other governments? Are they indeed extraterrestrial? Are they something else? Are they time travelers? Are they interdimensional craft? Who knows? But I would like that information out there. I think people overall could handle it. However, and look, especially in 2020, man, it's just keep throwing it out.
We have everything. If we can wrap our heads around all this shit.
Well, and even the well, the news item I didn't talk about was like this Loch Ness photo that came out the other day. It's like, of course, but and maybe it's not the Loch, and maybe it's not Nessie, but it's like, of course, there's a Loch Ness monster photo that would come out in 2020. So why not aliens? Give us
Yeah.
aliens. But I think that another Will Smith quote, well, from a Will Smith movie, Men in Black. Guessing you didn't see it.
No. I don't like Will
No.
Smith.
Okay. Yeah. Why would you like the one of the few remaining legitimate movie stars out there, one of the highest grossing
I
actors?
don't like that he named his kids after himself.
Okay.
I
I
know
guess
hearing
that's
myself say it out loud, it sounds so stupid. But I just
one good
think they're
reason
very full of themselves.
to, yeah, okay. See, I mean, like, I do agree maybe the Smith family is slightly eccentric, but Will Smith, especially in the mid 90s, when he's turning out hit after hit, Independence Day and then Men in Black, was a different story. Anyhow, from Men in Black, a great movie, especially for our audience. There's this moment where Will Smith's character says, "Why keep this notion of aliens secret? People are smart; they can handle it." And Tommy Lee Jones's character says, "A person is smart; people are dumb. People are dumb, panicky, dangerous
Yeah, yeah.
animals."
That's a good quote.
And so, I tend to think that that's interesting because, yes, I think people can process things, but people also get caught up in mob mentalities or conspiracy theories and hoaxes and things of that nature. So,
Yeah. So thanks for listening to our podcast, guys, while we fill you in with all that stuff of cryptids and conspiracies and
yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not. I don't really tell a lot of conspiracy theories.
true.
I
I
mean,
like
I
more
don't.
conspiracy theories, but we haven't done any.
Well, I like some conspiracy theories, but I like things that are more research that I can research a little bit more. But anyhow, that said, so oh well, let's maybe we should actually tell some
We should
stories.
tell some stories. We're
Okay,
like 20
so
minutes in.
yeah, well that's the news, and we're gonna talk about Fourth of July and National Nightmares right
Mm-hmm.
after this word from our sponsor. And we're back. Well, so let's dive in. Let's fire up the 4th of July barbecue,
Mm-hmm.
get some fireworks going, settle in for a spooky story. Britt, why don't you kick things off?
Great. So it is in San Angelo, Texas, where my story takes place. It's a small city kind of in the center of the state. It is 1987. Aaron's 10 years old. And Sally McNally. I'm really going to try to say her name correctly because I want to say Sally McNally, but it's not. It's Sally McNally. She is age 17 and she starts dating Shane Stewart, who is age 16. They had been dating for about 6 months when Sally's mom becomes suspicious that they are dabbling in a satanic cult because Sally is sneaking out at night. So to us, that probably seems like a huge jump to be like, you're
Right.
sleeping out at night, you love Satan. But in the time that this is happening, like the 80s and 90s, Satanic Panic is like a huge thing. That year, there's actually a huge court case going on where a preschool is being accused of satanic practices. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's kind of the moment.
I lived through the Satanic Panic. It was, it basically came into my own home. It was a real deal, and God knows I attended so many sleepovers with Satan. Satan throws some great slumber parties. So, I mean,
What kind of
Satanic
food does he
Panic.
serve? Flamin' hot Cheetos?
Um, he serves deviled eggs
Of course.
and devil's food cake
Oh,
And
devil's food cake is actually my favorite cake.
Satan is really on brand. But continue.
Continue. Pat, Sally's mom, started calling the parents of all of Sally's friends and said, like, what's going on? What, are your kids experiencing anything? And all the parents said that the kids were going to ritualistic parties. And that Sally had apparently gone into like a full trance at one of these parties, and it scared her friends so much that they stopped attending while Sally and Shane kept going, just the two of them. And similarly, Shane's dad was noticing the same thing with Shane, and that he was even starting to get into like really big fights with people at school, which was not his normal personality. So they know something's up and start getting strict. I'm sure probably, what's not giving them detention? What's the word? When you're like in trouble and not allowed to leave the house?
Grounded.
Grounded. I was never
Apparently
grounded.
this didn't happen to you.
No, I was never grounded. I was like a dork kid. But so I'm sure they got grounded and were scolded. So pissed off with their parents, these teenagers got an apartment together in early 1988. How they're allowed to do this, I don't get it. But they continued to go to cult meetings. But Sally started to like really getting scared for their lives. And at one point, actually, someone in the cult gave them a gun. I don't know if it's to commit a crime or for like security purposes, but Sally got freaked out and actually turned it into the police. And they were able to see the serial number on it and notice that it had been reported stolen by the original owner. So this dangerous cult was stealing guns. Sally and Shane were scared that the cult was going to retaliate on them. And again, these kids were like 18 years old. So they decided to skip town separately for a couple months. And then they both came back like 3 months later at the end of June, but told their friends that they're lying low because they're super terrified of this cult. And Sally actually was quoted by her friends, one of her friends, saying she was afraid that they were going to be killed. So on July 3rd, Shane is at his dad's house when they get a suspicious phone call. Shane's talking on the phone. His dad's in the room and is kind of overhearing, but not exactly sure what's being said. But the dad assumes that it's someone from the cult, and he hears Shane talking about money that he owes. And his dad told the police, like I said, do you need money? Are you in trouble? And Shane was like, no, I have it under control. So then comes the night in question. It's now the 4th of July, and like most young couples, they decide to hop in Shane's car and drive out to see the fireworks. They're in a part of San Angelo called Lake Nasworth. It's around 9 p.m. And then from there, after the fireworks are done, they're spotted at 1 a.m. and by a fisherman who spotted them at a place called O.C. Fisher Lake, which is only about 20 minutes away from where they saw the fireworks in the first place. And he saw them drinking and overheard them talking about not wanting to be with those people anymore. And so he's like, whatever, these are kids just drinking, partying, and he just kind of walks off. Personally, I have questions about what fisherman is out there at 1 a.m., but like, I don't know much about fishing, so maybe that's like a thing.
There's a lot of nighttime fishing that happens.
Interesting. 2 days later, Shane's car is found abandoned next to OC Lake when they were seen there at 1 a.m. And there's fast food wrappers all over the front seat of the car. And similar to last week's episode, the police label them as runaways since they had left town a few months ago. The police just kind of wrote it off like they dumped their car and ran away because they were, just troubled kids. Shane's dad and Sally's mom, of course, are convinced otherwise. Shane's dad tells them, about the call that he had gotten the day before, and actually said that Shane had said another teen in this group was out to get them and that they actually were super scared of him, and told this to police, but police did nothing. They didn't follow up on it. So Shane's dad actually went as far as going to this kid's house to question him himself, but the kid refused to talk. But he did apparently have scratches on him, and this was shared with police, and they never interviewed him. 4 months after this, their bodies are found where they first went to see the fireworks. So it's like they saw fireworks, they drove away, their car is found there, and their bodies are found back where they saw the fireworks. It's only 20 minutes. Looking on the maps, it's not super far. I just find it kind of suspicious that they'd be like back and forth. But their bodies were found. They had been killed by a shotgun blow to the head. And of course, then the police changed their tune about them being runaways.
That's convincing.
Convincing. Yep.
Yeah.
The trail, of course, had been gone cold by then. And like, honestly, one of the saddest things I've read while researching true crime stories was that Sally's mom told reporters that Sally was buried in her prom dress, which, like, that hit me really hard.
Definitely heartbreaking and a reminder of the youth, the lost life there.
So young.
A future robbed.
Yeah. So my story could end there. But in 2017, a man by the name of John Gilbreth was stopped at a traffic stop. And in his car, police found a half pound of weed, body armor, and a firearm. He could have played off like he was just a pothead hunter, but he was a felon from a previous crime. I did like a ton of internet digging, couldn't find out what this crime was. But I'm guessing dealing drugs because they found scales in his car as well. And in his mugshot photo, he's 47 and he looks like 100 years old. And hard drugs age you guys, so don't do drugs. But because he has all of this and was a felon, the police get a warrant to search his apartment. And guess what they find? A lock of hair, a fingernail, and blood that tied back to Shane and Sally. There were also 3 tapes with the initials SS. So it could be Shane Sally, or Shane's full name was Shane Stewart. So it could be either one of those. It hasn't been released what's on these tapes, but this guy is the exact same age as what Shane and Sally were at the time. Like, you know, if they had lived, they would all be the same age. So my speculation is that maybe this guy could have been the one his dad went to visit, but police never followed up on. That guy's name was never released because he wasn't a suspect, so we don't know. But that's my speculation. He's been marked a person of interest in this case. He hasn't officially been charged yet, even though he was released from federal prison a year ago for drug trafficking. But police say they are building a case, and they just want to be like 100% ready before they go to trial. So I've got my news alerts on, and I'm hoping that I can update you guys when more information comes across. But I'm hoping it's this dude and, you know, these families can get, you know, some justice.
Yeah. Wow. So this is ongoing.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Ongoing. And speaking of ongoing things, I actually this week got an update about a case I covered for the internet episode. Nothing exciting, but just both of those dates for the trial of the 2 killers were postponed because of COVID. So that's just another update. But yeah, I'll keep you guys updated for Shane and Sally's killer.
Yeah, that's crazy.
The 4th of July murders.
One thing I was going to say is, as we were talking, like, we should do an episode on cults.
Yes.
And maybe locations connected with them. Even though I was raised Catholic and did grow up during the Satanic Panic and do actually hold some belief about darker forces, you would say. Mm-hmm. I also do not necessarily buy into I think it's too easy to paint a lot of like people who practice certain kinds of belief systems, or even some Satanists themselves that are not, you know, it's easy to label them as evil or bad.
Totally. If you do research into Satanism, they're actually really peaceful people that fight for justice.
That some are.
Some are.
It's not like, it's not a strict belief system. There are some that use Satanism as sort of a way of rebelling or pushing back against religious norms or organized religion. But there are some that certainly do practice certain kind of black magic and ritualistic, like blood sacrifices, things like that, that are trying to actually bring about evil. But it's not. You can't really paint them all with the same brush. That said, it is interesting. It'd be a cool topic for us to get into.
Let's do
later
it.
on.
What's your topic for this week?
Well, I'm going to get into that, and it is connected to the founding of our country. But before I do, let's hear from another sponsor. And we're back. And we're going to continue our 4th of July and National Nightmares by actually talking a little bit about our founding fathers. Well, one of them, anyhow. So, in 1787, the nation was very young, and a group of well-known and powerful Philadelphians gathered together in the home of one Benjamin Franklin. You know him.
Benji.
And yes, apparently you know him personally. You always know someone knows a person personally that when you say their name, they respond with the nickname.
Yep.
Sort of like, have you heard of Thomas Jefferson? Oh, Tommy.
Yep.
Tommy. Tomster.
TJ.
We go way back. Yeah, TJ. Anyhow, TJ was not there to my knowledge, but Benji was. Benjamin Franklin, everybody gathered at his house, and instead of throwing a party like you might do when you've got a young republic on your hands, instead, the members of the Philadelphia Society for Alleviating the Miseries of Public Prisons, that's a mouthful,
Yeah.
they were expressing growing concern with the conditions in American and European prisons. Okay, so now enter a different Benji, Dr. Benjamin Rush, and he had the goal to see that Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, would set sort of this international standard in prison design. He proposed this radical idea to build a penitentiary, a prison, and then this word was new, this didn't exist, a prison designed to create genuine regret and penitence in the criminal's heart. And this is...
Can I guess?
And, well, before I get to that, let me say that this is not just this is part of the country's young history, but also notable because this structure became as much a part of American history because it set a standard worldwide and was considered an architectural wonder. So, yes, what was built 30 years later in farmland outside of Philadelphia?
Eastern State.
Yes, Eastern State Penitentiary.
I was hoping you would cover this. You're an expert on it.
Well, Eastern State is certainly a near and dear to my heart. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit later.
He was
so
there.
30
he
years.
was stationed there for a bit, guys.
I was not, because it closed before I was born. But 30 years later, in farmland outside of Philadelphia, now, of course, it's just part of Philadelphia. It's not farmland. But 30 years later, Eastern State Penitentiary did open, and the first prisoner was Charles Williams. Charles Williams, prisoner number 1. Just so we have a sense of the description that they wrote down. Charles Williams, prisoner number 1, burglar, light black skin, 5 feet 7 inches tall. His foot size was 11 inches, scar on nose, scar on thigh, broad mouth, black eyes, farmer by trade, can read, theft included one $20 watch, one $3 gold seal, one gold key, and sentenced to 2 years of confinement. So, you kind of get a sense that people were locked away for quite a long ways, a long time, for not huge crimes.
Yeah.
And actually, there were female inmates there as well. The first female inmate was brought in 1831, and they were held, many of them, women were held there until 1923. Anyhow, this new structure, it opened in 1829. It became one of the most expensive buildings in America at its opening, and it was the most famous prison in the world. The idea of the penitentiary was not just to punish, but to move the criminal towards some sort of spiritual reflection. How did they do this? Well, this was inspired by a Quaker system. Isolation, primarily. Isolation and labor. So this system was very strict, and to focus these prisoners, they would have minimal interaction with the guards. They were hooded whenever they were outside of their cells, like literally hooded. I think they had earmuffs on, so there was not a lot. They were essentially sensory deprivation. The guards themselves would walk through with padded shoes, and the food carts were padded so you wouldn't hear them coming and going. And isolated from other prisoners, they had this cell with a private little garden. Wasn't a nice thing though, because they were kept in their cells all day long. I think they had like an hour outside of their cells in the garden. They also had this little skylight. Some people called it the eye of God. This has been somewhat disputed, but the idea was to focus your reflection on your penitence. This is where we got this new word, penitentiary, through penitence. Silence and reflection. The architect behind it was actually British, Jonathan Haviland. He designed this building. This was also the most modern building in America at the time. And some of the things that made it so modern was, well, there was a central rotunda that could look down these initial 7 cell blocks. It was a form of surveillance. It was a central rotunda. You could look down and see what was going on in each cell block. Also, in addition to every prisoner having their own private cell, it was, again, architectural wonder. It was centrally heated. There was running water and a flushing toilet in addition to that skylight. And and then their exercise yard had like a 10-foot wall. So they had this heat and running water and a flushing toilet in an age when not even Andrew Jackson, who was in the White House, had running water.
Wow.
And so this was a very Gothic style building, Gothic exterior with this massive wall, this menacing medieval facade. And the idea is it's meant to intimidate. It looks like a place, a castle or a fortress, but not a good one, like a place where that you are going to be punished behind these walls. Well, it was working out because it became a model for other prisons across the globe, and it became a tourist attraction because of it being an architectural wonder. And I think at one point 10,000 people came to visit it in 1 year. So this was called the Pennsylvania system, this form of prison and punishment. Pretty much early on, people did develop concerns about the humanity of this solitary confinement. Again, removed from other prisoners. So what happens when you're not even interacting with guards? You can't hear the other prisoners. You can't interact. Some people tried to establish communication between cells, but overall, perhaps not shockingly, it led to a lot of madness. It's a lot of mental health issues that took place. We are social animals, humans are, and this isolation was brutal. And in fact, one person that wrote about it early on was Charles Dickens. Now, of course, we know him as the author of, like A Christmas Carol.
Yeah, but I love A Christmas Carol.
But he was a journalist. He was a journalist as well, especially before before Christmas Carol, and Eastern State was one of the places he definitely needed to visit when he came to America. And in 1842, he wrote, quote, "In its intention, I am well convinced that it is kind, humane, and meant for reformation. But, big but there, I am persuaded that those who design this system of prison discipline and those benevolent gentlemen who carry it into execution do not know what it is they are doing. I hold this slow and daily tampering with the mysteries of the brain to be immeasurably worse than any torture of the body, and because its ghastly signs and tokens are not so palpable to the eye, and it extorts few cries that humans can hear, therefore I must denounce it as a secret punishment in which slumbering humanity is not roused up to stay." Which is a very poignant way of saying this is messing with people's minds. You're breaking people. And, well, it wasn't just the solitary confinement. It was also some of the punishment. Some of the things included this thing called the iron gag, which definitely sounds medieval in nature. And it was a clamp that would be affixed around a prisoner's tongue, and then there would be some chains or cords that were then connected to the hands, the wrists that would be chained behind their back. And essentially, people would be forced to maintain that position for a long time. And as if they struggled, if they moved, if they just had to stretch out their muscles or whatever, the more they did that, the more this gag would clamp around the tongue, leading to enormous blood loss, death, obviously a lot of pain, very gruesome. Other things was, imagine Philadelphia. Now, I can say Eastern State Penitentiary, whatever the temperature is outside, it's somehow worse behind those walls. If it's a brutal, hot Philadelphia day, it feels even more humid and hot inside. And on those cold days, those stone walls just make it so bitterly cold. So one of the things they would do, this is also fun, they would dip some of the prisoners as punishment into a bath of ice water, and then maybe even hang them up, sort of chain them to a wall so this water would freeze to them.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so
God bless
definitely
America.
a lot of brutality. And so let's continue then. So yes, that was part of the reason that Charles Dickens was not for it, but a lot of people were not for it as well because of the solitary confinement. I don't know if they knew about those forms of punishment. But this system stuck around until 1913, this Pennsylvania system of solitary confinement. And actually, there's evidence that it started to break down before then, but it was officially abandoned. It sort of eroded away and then was officially abandoned in 1913. As the building became modernized, it also started, it had a factory-style weaving shop, a commercial-grade bakery. There was an inmate newspaper about the Interpenitentiary Baseball League. And then there was 2 to 3 men to a cell. The last major addition to the Eastern State Penitentiary, one of the last major buildings, was Cell Block 15, a.k.a. Death Row, that was added in 1956. It should be noted, they did not conduct executions on the grounds of Eastern State Penitentiary, but there was this Death Row where they would then be shipped elsewhere. There's also this, in modern times, a solitary confinement area called Klondike, or the Hole, and I've spent some time in there as a filming things, not as a prisoner.
Did you eat a Klondike bar?
No, but that tagline of "What would you do
For a Klondike bar?"
Instead, it's "What would you not do?" or "What would you do to stay out of Klondike, the hole
Nailed
of
it.
misery?"
Nailed it. We'll sell that anyhow, as a ringtone.
Yes. So it's worth noting that a building that was designed to hold 250 people through some renovations, but also a lot of overcrowding, ended up holding I think upwards of 1,700 people at a time. And there were a lot of deaths, and there were riots and whatnot, but I just wanted to mention that some of the early deaths in 1877, I've had the rare opportunity of going through the archives at Eastern State Penitentiary. This is not on display in the museum, and this is something to behold. But in 1877, obviously when this was still a young prison, you would see death by consumption, and then there was one death by masturbation, which is interesting. Some, which I believe was referred to as dropsy, perhaps. But there's also
wait. We're overblowing that. What does that mean?
Well, I will say this. What that means, I don't know about that particular case, but you'll see things that are just listed as debility or physical debility or other kind of entries. What that can mean is that, oops, these things happen. That
Jesus.
sometimes there are deaths and you just need to write down some reason for it. So perhaps due to abuse or extreme punishment, which is abuse. And, you can also look through and see that there was a list. It's broken down just by, under this quote unquote color category of blacks and whites. And that's about as intricate as it gets. But there's, as you can imagine, there were a lot of, I would say, somewhat suspicious deaths.
Yeah, they're just filling in the
prison
line.
logs. Yes, and it's pretty sad to look at and go through here. But so yeah, consumption pops up a lot. But so a lot of, or some of America's more notorious criminals were held at Eastern State. One of them is Al Capone.
Mm-hmm.
He was held there. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison at Eastern State in 1929. This was the first time he was actually in front of a judge. And it was pretty cushy for him.
Yeah.
He spent a lot of that in relative comfort. He was allowed to furnish his room with these antiques, these rugs, these oil paintings. There's a recreation of that at Eastern State today. Also, bank robber Willie Sutton was there, and he joined a doomed 1945 tunnel escape. There was also a dog. 1924, there was Pep, the cat murdering dog, which is somewhat lighthearted compared to some of the other deaths and ugliness that was there. The idea there was that perhaps the governor claimed that this dog killed his wife's precious cat and was sentenced to life at Eastern State. However, there's a lot of speculation that perhaps it was more sent there to boost morale.
Got it.
But I don't know how Pep felt about that.
Yeah.
But there were riots in 1933 and 34 over mistreatment. The largest riot in the prison's history was in 1961, and that's when a lot of discussions of closure took place. It was just overcrowded. It was in desperate need of repairs. It was falling apart. Well, it was closed in 1971, which is to say that there were people that were inmates held there who are still alive, who are still out there, and I've had the opportunity to speak to some of them. It's interesting. The Eastern State Penitentiary has done a lot of good work in talking about the prison system and the sort of the cruel, quote unquote, justice of the prison system. They've got a lot of amazing exhibits, but perhaps not surprisingly, notorious for being allegedly haunted. And some of the ghost stories that I've heard of go back to 1940, but some say it's one of the most haunted locations in the nation. Well, why would it be haunted? Obviously, the abuse, the isolation. But then I tend to think that the fact that so it was closed in 1971, 1994 it was just left there. An urban jungle overtook the place, overtaken by nature. It was just sitting there, and in 1994 tours began, and I think that there was just sort of this stew of energy building there. Some of the stories that you hear about, pretty much all throughout the building, stories of disembodied voices, whispers, a lot of shadow figure activity, door handles that seem to jiggle on their own, voices coming through radios. I've heard of that, like people that have worked there, some voices coming through the radios, which is not surprising. That's electronic voice phenomena. Screams, laughter, cell block 12, cell block 4, death row / Klondike the Hole. Those are all considered very potent areas. The guard tower. In cell block 12, there's a lot of shadow figures in particular. There was this, I believe this was added 82 years after the initial opening of the prison. It was not part of the original structure, but stories of doors that seem to open on their own in cell block 4. Weird kind of shadow faces emerging from the wall. Cell block 4 might be my favorite. There was the famous story of Gary the locksmith in the early 1990s who went to crack off a 142-year-old lock, and according to him, he felt this almost vortex open, this pulling feeling of these forces that were pulling him forward. He was beckoned even by a figure to come forward. And so that seems to be a very intense, energetic area. It's also, if I remember correctly, it's an area where a guard was murdered by an inmate. And then supposedly Al Capone was haunted in his cell by the victim of someone that he had killed, James Clark, Jimmy, in a hit that he had ordered in the Valentine's Day Massacre. It connects to your Chicago history. Yeah, actually, Capone only stayed there for about 8 months, so he was supposedly haunted. He would be known for shouting out, "Jimmy, leave me alone, Jimmy, Jimmy." He also had syphilis.
I was just gonna say, do you think that's true, or do you think that's the syphilis talking?
Well, one doesn't know, but he did have syphilis. There's the guard tower, where this was built in the 1950s, where there are a lot of reports of seeing a guard move around up there. And let me say, because this is in the middle of the city now. It was farmland. It's now in the middle of the city. So you walk by, there's bustling life of Philadelphia, and then there's this massive fortress, and you encounter it, and you see the guard tower, and a lot of times especially during Halloween time when they do the haunted attraction Terror Behind the Walls, which is how they raise a lot of funds to keep this place operational, they keep the guard tower on, the searchlight on that, so it's like almost like a lighthouse in the middle of Philadelphia. It is an imposing structure in Philadelphia.
Have you done the Halloween haunted housey thing?
Oh, many times. So
is it super scary?
It's very good, and it's notable for being one of the truly the best in the nation. And look, I don't
think I could do it.
I love haunted house attractions. And first off, let me say Eastern State Penitentiary, Terror Behind the Walls is very respectful. They use the prison history without mocking the pain and suffering that took place there. For instance, there's not a room where you walk in where somebody is wearing that iron gag. They don't exploit that part of the history. Yeah, well, I would find that rather crass. And instead, it is scary. It's a cool haunt, and compared to, I love Universal Halloween Horror Nights. I grew up with that in Orlando. That's a multi-million-dollar budget haunt, whereas Eastern State Penitentiary does not have that kind of budget, but they do execute a really great attraction. In fact, I went through I was on an assignment, I was dressed up as a zombie, and I haunted. I was worked a night as a scare actor in Eastern State. But yeah, I think it's worth noting a couple things. This is probably one of my favorite paranormal locations. It is truly connected to the origins of our nation. You know, we're setting up all these government systems and figuring out how our country works. But then it's like, oh, also, let's figure out the prison system, which I suppose is an important thing. But now, some 244 years later, we realize that, well, okay, we got it wrong. And our prison system is a mess and a place where a lot of times minorities are locked away for somewhat minor infractions. It's not about rehabilitating people. It's a profit making system.
Yep.
And it's very broken. But for me personally, yeah, I first visited Eastern State in something like 2004 or 5, and then it became part of my paranormal journey, and is very much how I entered into this world on a professional level, was by going to Eastern State and having my own experience there, and then going back and having multiple experiences there. I've been there, more than 24 times now. Still one of my favorite places, and it's definitely a place where the ghost stories are amazing, are impressive. It's compelling. As much as a skeptic as I can be, like, I've had incredible experiences there, but it's also a way, these ghost stories are a way to keep the history alive of a lot of pain and suffering that took place there. Keep history alive by telling these stories.
Yeah. Can we, for the mini-sode this week, can you tell your stories of what happened to you at Eastern State?
Sure. Probably not all of them, but yeah, I will talk
cool.
a little bit about some of those.
Sign up for our Patreon at patreon.com/NightMerica.
Well, that's a good tease. Yeah. I will, but I will say that I'll go into it further, but even as someone that is constantly debunking stories and my own stories, I'm trying to always understand it. I've had some of the most insane shadow figure encounters there, and strange recordings, and I will go into detail in the mini-sode.
I'm so excited.
It'll be fun to talk about. The one thing I will say, yeah, so it's a very personal place for me. I truly love it, which is why I'm going to end on this note. Eastern State is very threatened right now. This is a national landmark. It is a way of telling not just about ghost stories, not just telling ghost stories, but it's a way of telling about our nation's history and our nation's very problematic history with the prison system. Well, because of COVID-19, they have had to unfortunately lay off a significant number of their staff, and they have a great staff there. And they unfortunately have had to cancel Terror Behind the Walls this year, which is the way that they make most of their funds for the following year. So they are in dire straits. They're in dire financial straits. And if they can't afford to keep this place open, I guarantee there's going to be a developer that comes along and is going to able to convince the city to allow them to buy this space. And then this area that takes up an entire city block or more than that is going to get torn down, this piece of history. So I would like to ask anyone out there, please, if you are able, go to easternstate.org/support and throw a couple bucks their way if you're able, or even tell other people about it and spread the word, because this is such an important part of American history. In Philadelphia, in sort of the cradle of our democracy, there's also this landmark of our punishment system, of our judicial system. So I would like to ask everybody to show some love to Eastern State if you can.
That's awesome.
Pick up anything here? Did we cover everything, Britt? Did you have any questions about Eastern State and some of the
I mean,
ghost stories?
I've known you for over a year now, so I know quite a bit about Eastern State. I have seen when you were made up like a zombie, which hopefully you'll send me so I can post to the Instagram. Um, but I didn't realize the importance to our history. Like, I know we talk about these kind of stories a lot, and I think we often forget how important it is to have something like this to tell our stories and how troublesome prisons are in the nations right now. These for-profit prisons are just, I mean, they make you sick. So I think that's a really good point to talk about, kind of saving this huge part of our American history.
Yeah, and Eastern State is also I forget offhand the name of this exhibit, but they have these exhibits about detailing sort of prison systems around the world, detailing what this says about us as a a nation. They've gone into how what prisons today look like and how sort of that foundation was established in via Eastern State. So they definitely reckon with the importance
Mm-hmm.
of this real history, and they don't sugarcoat it. It gets very dark, and in fact, I remember they did this exhibit on dark tourism and how Eastern State kind of connects with even other dark tourist locations, like even Dachau, which is
Yeah.
obviously the concentration camp is very different, but this is also sort of this thing. But I will say, a final moment is this is a just a kind of gee whiz perspective. It's such a hauntingly gorgeous building. I would never want to be brought into there as a prisoner, but it's such a hauntingly gorgeous building. I'm in love with this building just architecturally, these high vaulted ceilings. I'll tell you what, if ghosts aren't real, if ghosts don't exist, they would still it's almost like this is still a perfect haunted house, and if ghosts do exist, then I don't think you could find anywhere that's a better location than somewhere like Eastern
Yeah.
State for them to haunt.
Are they doing virtual tours?
They have been doing some virtual
I'd like to
tours,
sign up for
and
that.
I believe it still is continuing. They're trying to reopen in a limited capacity in July, so soon after we record this. So hopefully that does happen,
Yeah.
but they desperately need that support. So after reckoning with some interesting dark elements connected to the birth of our nation, let's round things out with some paranormal pop culture recommendations. What are you into this week?
Well, my paranormal pop culture actually kind of ties in with the talk of prisons, but mine is a show that aired Sunday, June 28th. I'll Be Gone in the Dark on HBO. So excited. I've been waiting for this desperately. I loved Michelle McNamara's book. For those that don't know, Patton Oswalt's wife, Michelle McNamara, wrote a book about the Golden State Killer. You might also know him as the Visalia Ransacker, East Area Rapist, Original Night Stalker, or D'Angelo, which is his actual name. It's I think a 6-part series. They're doing it so well where they're telling the story of the Golden State Killer, but then they're also sharing the really beautiful love story of Michelle and Patton, and it's just so great. And to top it all off, this morning, June 29th, the day we're recording this, D'Angelo has agreed to plead guilty for 13 counts of first-degree murder.
Wow.
He will not get the death penalty. Instead, he will have to serve life in prison without parole. So suck it, you asshole. That's my
Okay then.
That's my pop culture.
Well, I'm familiar with that project. I think it's really interesting. I did not know that it spoke to the relationship of Patton and Michelle as well.
It's
So,
really great.
okay. That's interesting. All right, well, I'll definitely have to check it out. I was aware of it. I just haven't been able to see it yet. So, yeah, the first episode premiered.
It aired last night at the same time as Paranormal Caught on Camera. So
All right, I'm not going to ask which one you watched live. Although I will say it's always great when you can watch live because we can use those numbers, baby. Okay, well, my recommendation last week I was talking about the Umbrella Academy, and I'm going to kind of go in a sort of the flip side of that. Doom Patrol. Doom Patrol airs on HBO Max streaming platform as well as the DC Universe streaming platform. And it's another show sort of about these misfit heroes. They're not even really entirely like heroes. They occasionally do heroic things, but it stars Timothy Dalton and Brendan
oh my
Fraser
god, him.
and Matt Bomer and Diane Guerrero, April Bowlby, Hovian Wade. And the thing I'll say about it, so it's like really weird, but in a like there was a scene last season. The second season is now airing. There was and I think the first 3 episodes are available on YouTube for free of the second season, and so it's about sort of this guy he's a robot man. It's a human brain stuck in a robot's body, but not like a cool robot, but a broke down, beat up robot. There's Elastigirl, which is a woman that stretches but doesn't control her powers. So each of these are kind of freaks by superhero standards. They're not cool looking. Their powers are impressive, but they're not sexy by any stretch. But it's incredibly weird. And last season there was a talking cockroach who spouted apocalyptic notions, and there's this Constantine type character, except his name's Willoughby, and he's a drunk, and played by Mark Sheppard from Supernatural, for any of you out there that know that one. And based on the comic books, and the Grant Morrison comic books in particular, that had that arc of them that has such an influence on this particular show. But the thing is, and the reason why you might be into it, Britt, is it's weird and it's darkly funny, and it's definitely a hard R-rated show, but amongst all this weirdness, there's a lot of heart. These characters are dealing with a lot of trauma and heartbreak, but there's this one character in particular that his sort of superhero name is Negative Man, but he's Larry Trainer. He's played by Matt Bomer, and also Matthew Zuck. Sort of two actors portray him, and he's this Air Force pilot, I believe, from the 50s, who had this alien energy that sort of attacked his test flight and burned him badly, but sort of this self-loathing over this physical transformation is mirrored in the fact that he's also a homosexual man that's grappling with this identity, a homosexual man from the 1950s, and he's in denial about that, and he loathes himself for that as well. But there is some incredibly touching moments as in that first season, as he comes to terms with his personality, with his identity, and that's only one element. There's other characters who have been victims of some abuse, some pretty extreme abuse, and how that's connected to their various powers. But it's also funny. It's wildly funny and touching and heartbreaking at times. And yeah, I highly... And plus, Brendan Fraser, who plays Robot Man, Cliff Steele, the man swears a lot, but I don't think I've encountered someone that's delivering an F-bomb quite as satisfying as Brendan Fraser. The way he swears is almost like an art form. So I would... it's just one that I'm... Yeah, it's... I've seen the first 3 episodes of the second season, and it is well worth your time. It's a weird show, but a great show. And it really makes you care about these characters. It's perhaps one of the more diverse shows out there as well right now. So Doom Patrol season 2. Well, that said, I think we've wrapped up It's another long episode. It's my fault. But we've wrapped up another story time, NightMerican story time, and let's go head out and have some hamburgers and blast some fireworks.
Yeah, guys.
Do some cool American stuff.
If you like NightMerica, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/NightMerica and consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Give us a follow on social media and share this with your friends.
And if you'd like to share your paranormal stories or even seek paranormal advice, which is for entertainment purposes only, email nightmericashow@gmail.com.